Today's story was written by Reddit user FrontStrike8690. Twindle of the Red Mages, Silverstone, Tartarus Fields. I crested the ridge and our target came into view, a small human outpost, only 30 soldiers strong. We began our descent down the hill. At a signal from our leader, my teacher, Erica, we held our position, maintaining our cloaking spell on the normal soldiers continuing down the hill. We set our positions, archers behind foot soldiers, with us in the back to have the best view for spellcasting. We stood still and quiet as the archers drew their bows. I was getting nervous because of the deafening silence from the lack of wildlife noises. I panicked and almost struck out blindly when Erica tapped my shoulder. She looked at me in concern before saying, "How are you feeling today?" I drew in a shaky breath and said, "Fine, just a bit nervous. This is my first engagement ever, you know." "I know, don't worry, you'll be fine. We outnumber them and are better than them. Remember your betterment lessons." "But won't the humans notice the birds have gone quiet? I wish the birds didn't sense us." Erica smirked and whispered back, "Really, Twindle? The humans are nowhere near as in tune with nature as us. I'd be surprised if their primitive ears can even notice the difference." She smiled and moved on to the next person in line. I remembered my betterment lessons. They were mandatory for all elf students. I honestly didn't think it was true. Many of the statements my teacher made were derogatory towards all other races. He said he thought the other races were little more than animals. I still find that impossible to believe, because if that were true, how would the other races be able to function or build society? His answer: they simply imitate the elves. How could this be when humans make civilization and great works of art of a completely different design than ours? They make weapons of their own and worship gods of their own, even if they are false. That doesn't affect what's about to happen in front of me. I paused as I saw another new soldier loosen his bow. I panicked and reached out with an ice spell, freezing the bow. I sighed in relief. Our position wasn't revealed yet. Then I heard a shout from the wall. I released my focus to look at the person shouting. This released the spell and the arrow sped away, slamming into a soldier on the wall. The rest of the soldiers began to move forward and I started to uncloak myself when Erica stopped me. "We must maintain our position," she said. "But we need to support our troops." "Right now they don't know we have mages. That's our advantage. Besides, we outnumber them too. We might not even be needed. Remember, we're leaving space for the humans to retreat. They're cowardly. They'll take the escape like any sane person would." I sighed and turned to watch the battle. I watched as our soldiers approached the wall and thought about all who would soon be dead and dying. It was important I do this so that I never grew callous to the death I caused, either directly or through my orders. Then I looked confused as soldiers began to fall. But how? They hadn't even reached the wall yet. I looked more closely at the wall, then my gaze went lower. Those clever humans. They'd built firing platforms under the wall. Erica approached angrily. "Those stupid humans. They fight without honor. They built traps. Traps! They're like weasels, hiding and waiting for an opportunity to strike." I watched her closely and thought about how her arrogance had gotten so many men killed before responding. "Let's drop our cloaking and blind the crossbowmen." Erica raged on. "No, that's too easy on them." She turned and gathered all the mages around her with a wave of her hand. "Prepare to launch a combination fireball at the fort." Gasps went all around. That was a very complicated spell that drained the energy from multiple mages at once to create a fireball capable of leveling a small town. Yet still, we all gathered into a line and began chanting the incantations for the spell. We sang like the elves of old, gathering our souls into one, feeling what all others felt: pain, guilt, rage, sadness. We felt our power soar, then nothing. I turned and saw Erica fall, an arrow in her head. I turned in a blind rage and hurled a gigantic fireball at the archer responsible for this murder. I saw it smash into the wall, eviscerating the entire section of the wall. I turned and fell to my knees at the feet of my mentor's body, sobbing in heart-ripping grief. Then I felt my sadness change to anger. I thought back on when I'd first been introduced to my mentor. "She's not your typical elf, Twindle." "I know, Father. I will do my best to make you proud." "I know you will, Twin." She entered and bowed. "Hello, Your Highnesses. It will be my honour to teach your daughter." From that day on, we trained, night and day. She was kind but stern. She said she was a very emotional elf, and to not disturb her during one of her moods. When she had her mood, she was a wrath but still had enough self-control to teach me, and if she ever snapped at me, she would apologise and give me a nice iced juice to make up for it. I felt my mind being made up as I gave her one final look. "I will find who did this to you and avenge you, my teacher." I looked at the other, equally furious mages, and we came to an unspoken consensus. Fireballs began to fly into the human fort. We avoided our own people, but were ruthless, burning humans and throwing fireballs left and right. Then I realised there should be no structure left standing, and threw a fireball into the barracks, destroying the corner room on the second floor. I dropped into the middle of the camp in a flurry of dust. I launched a wave of fire at 2 soldiers attempting to charge me. As I looked around the camp, my sharp eyes came to focus on a small bird, a pigeon, as it flew from a tower in the far end of the camp. I began to approach the tower, ignoring the battle raging around me as humans desperately fought to the end. Were they stupid? We were leaving room for them to retreat. We wanted the fort with minimal casualties. Why weren't they running? 2 soldiers stood in front of the tower, and as I watched another join them, I sighed but stiffened when I saw the insignia of a captain on the uniform of the new soldier. I attempted to unleash another fireball at them, but I realised just how drained I really was, as I struggled to conjure even a medium-sized fireball. So I settled for a small fireball and felt myself begin to fade as I sapped the last of my body's strength. So I threw the fireball and saw it smash into the captain. Before blacking out, I saw the other 2 soldiers rushing the captain's limp body away towards the stables. When I woke up next, I stared up at Tuil as she smiled at me through gritted teeth. I sat up and looked around at all the injured soldiers around me. There were nurses and healers going through using life magic to resuscitate the wounded. I groaned as I held my head and asked, "How many of ours?" Tuil grimaced and said, 46 dead, another 30 wounded." I stared down at my hands and thought, the humans had proved to be far more cunning than any would have given them credit for. They had well-planned defences and traps, which had defeated our understanding of their complexity by themselves. They had fought savagely with a blood rage the orcs would have envied. If they knew how to do that, as well as with skill, they had fought to the last man, never giving a foot of ground even as their comrades fell around them, and fire melted their armour and skin together, all throughout screaming a horrible war cry from their dying lips. I exited the infirmary to escape the smell of death and the sound of the wounded and dying. I stepped outside, took a deep breath, and was assaulted by a riot of smells. Blood, dust, dirt, and steel. It was everywhere. I looked at the human corpses that lay mutilated and destroyed. Some had clearly been cut down multiple times, only to stand back up, Others looked like they'd been ripped to pieces by fireballs. These humans had fought to the death, all the way down to the last man. I shuddered as I thought about it and began to think to myself that maybe we'd made a huge mistake. We'd already clearly underestimated humans. They had defended the ill with their last breath. They were clearly compassionate, but they were also terrible, fighting with their teeth and nails when their weapons shattered and their quivers ran empty. That was human nature, compassionate and loving, but it appeared they were also cunning and vicious to a level we could have never predicted. I fear our biggest fault is not a physical or mental weakness, but one of our mindset.